We're here at Plum Centre in Leamington Spa for a debate about the Green Deal. The Green Deal has now been enshrined in statute. It's in the Energy Act 2011. It's one of the most ambitious programmes that any government has introduced in Britain to promote energy conservation, energy efficiency, give people that upfront funding they need to install new installation, maybe a new boiler, double glazing, to reduce their energy bills and reduce their carbon output. We've assembled a panel of experts from business and government and the skilled sector to talk about the Green Deal. Join us for the debate. We hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Building Centre here at the Plum Centre in sunny Leamington Spa. My name is Nick Bent. I'm the editor of Energy and Environmental Management magazine, and this is the first of a series of roundtables that EAEM are hosting on the subject of the Green Deal. I'm delighted that we have a very distinguished and diverse panel of experts here to talk about the Green Deal, with a particular emphasis on things like the financial structure of the Green Deal, the incentive systems for business and householders. We're going to be talking about some of the skills challenges to fulfil the potential of the Green Deal. So we're all set for a really fascinating discussion about one of the biggest policy innovations in the energy field for many, many years. I'm going to start by asking our panel to introduce themselves and just in 2 sentences for each of them to tell us why the Green Deal is important to them and to their organisation. So starting on my right with Richard.
Oh, hello, I'm Richard Foxwell, Head of Green Skills and Asset Skills. We're Sector Skills Council involved in national occupational standards and qualifications for Green Deal advisors. We're also working with construction skills and summit skills on skills and qualifications for installers.
Thank you. Tim.
Hello, I'm Tim Pollard. I'm Head of Sustainability for Plum Centre, one of the largest suppliers of central heating and plumbing products in the UK. I'm responsible for Green Deal strategy and policy here at Plum Centre. We see Green Deal as a fantastic opportunity, and in particular for engaging our legion of small and medium enterprises so that they can benefit from the opportunities that are likely to flow.
Thank you, Tim. Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma Fraser from the Department for Energy and Climate Change, and I lead work on Green Deal finance and Green Deal providers. I hope it's well known that the government sees the Green Deal as a top priority going forward, and we too see it as a massive opportunity not only to deliver the carbon reduction that we need to meet our commitments, but also to deliver a change in attitudes towards energy efficiency across the population as a whole.
Great, thank you, Emma. David.
Hello, I'm David Adams from Wilmot Dixon Energy Services, where I'm Technical Director. In short, we see it as a really significant market opportunity, and importantly, one that should run for many years and provide, I think, we would hope, a vibrant and significant demand. So we're intending to be a Green Deal provider within that space.
Great, thank you. Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Davies from PricewaterhouseCoopers. We're one of the founder members of the Green Deal Finance Company, which is a national not-for-profit company that's been set up to provide low-cost finance to the Green Deal.
Fantastic, thank you. And Brian.
Brian Scannell, Managing Director of National Energy Services. We run the NHER Accreditation scheme for energy assessors. I also chair the advisory forum for the accreditation and qualification of Green Deal advisors. For us, it's very much about delivering energy efficiency, delivering the step change in energy efficiency in homes and buildings generally that we have been pushing for, advocating, aspiring towards for the last 25 years. Crucially, this is about delivery rather than anything else, but we're very keen on ensuring people are getting good quality advice and creating opportunities for the energy assessors that are already out there.
Great, well thank you all for those opening remarks. Clearly this is a huge thing for ministers in the coalition government. They do put a lot of priority on the Green Deal. Some of us are working full-time on Green Deal issues, or very nearly full-time. But I want to start by asking, what do we think the level of awareness and demand is amongst householders across the country and amongst the business community? Because obviously the Green Deal has been set up so that businesses can benefit from that upfront financing, as well as householders. And I'll ask Emma, as the representative of DECC, to answer that first.
Well, I think that awareness of Green Deal is probably fair to say it's mixed. We've carried out some consumer insight work over the past year, and we're continuing to do so. And I think that the Green Deal at the moment is still a new idea for most consumers. It needs to be explained to them in some detail. But I think that awareness is improving. I think that the Green Deal is getting quite a lot of coverage in some of the press, which is helping to extend awareness. And as providers become more committed to Green Deal, we expect to see them doing more to raise awareness as well.
Right, thank you. Now, Tim, at the Plum Centre, obviously your company, your customers are at the sort of the grassroots on the Green Deal. What's your sense of the level of interest and awareness amongst householders, the small business community?
Well, again, I think it's early days. I think certainly amongst the professionals, there's a better depth of knowledge than there is for householders. And I think certainly the success of some of the schemes like the feed-in tariffs has certainly, I think, encouraged us in terms of the potential for success. But I think until the details are more clear, then it's going to be difficult to try and engage both professionals and the householders. But certainly I think the scale of the opportunity is something which excites us all.
Yes.
I think there are some definite concerns from the smaller businesses that this will be a complex programme which will be, for them, difficult to gain entry to, and our commitment is to help them make that bridge.
Right. So there's a sense that awareness is building. There may be some scepticism, some details that still need to be filled in. I know that the latest consultation from DECC finished last week.
That's
so the government now has a chance to respond to that. Richard, you wanted to come in as well.
Yes, as a bit of concrete evidence, we're in the middle of running 19 events, mainly around skills for both advisors and assessors and installers, and we're massively oversubscribed. This afternoon in Birmingham we've got 250 people booked. They won't all turn up, but nevertheless, massive interest from the supply side in terms of assessors, advisors and installers.
Right, that's great. Obviously this is all about money. The reason why the millions and millions of homes and businesses we have in Britain haven't already done some fairly basic things around insulation, lagging pipes, lagging lofts, cavity wall insulation and so on is because there has been a market failure, and the Green Deal is designed to address that. So it all come down to the numbers, whether people feel it's financially worthwhile for them to go for the Green Deal, what incentives are on offer, what the interest rate will be on the loan that they're incurring, which will be a factor for people, even though that attaches to the sort of the building rather than to them as an individual. Paul, you're masterminding the Green Deal Finance Corporation. What's your take on this?
Well, I mean, firstly, what we're trying to do is try to, rather than make this personal loans, which are quite expensive, trying to do this on an aggregated basis and basically raise our finance in the bond markets. So effectively getting it at an investment grade pricing as low as possible. Mm-hmm. And because we're not for profit, passing that straight through to customers. So they effectively, individuals are accessing the investment grade bond market. So getting as low as possible. In terms of what the rate will be, well, the thing we can't control is the prevailing interest rate in the market. So hopefully in the 5 to 6% figure, but it depends on what the interest rate will be at the time, and that bit I can't control.
Right.
But as low as possible.
Is that impacted by the Eurozone crisis as everything else seems to be?
Interest rates, yes. Yes, it will be, yeah.
And some people have asked me, well, if this is a not-for-profit organisation, sort of what's in it for you and some of the other very large, well-respected companies who are involved in the Green Deal Finance Corporation?
Well, if you look at the members, they are all ostensibly going to be providers. They are interested in making the Green Deal work. It works better and better the lower the cost of finance. So they are all actively working on this precisely to make it work. And so what it means is finance becomes an enabler for the actual market, and where the real competition is, which is on pricing, on warranties, and on quality of service. So the whole market supports it because it's an enabler. That's what's in it for them.
Right. We live in an age of austerity. Everyone is now far more worried about debt than they were perhaps 5 years ago, when everyone seemed to be happy to take on more debt. There was easy credit. Is that a problem to the fulfilling the potential of the Green Deal, that more people now are worried about debt and taking on any sort of obligation looks like a bad idea in the current climate? And David, I wanted to bring you on this. You've put your hand up to volunteer that Wilmot Dixon is going to be a Green Deal provider, which is great. I'm sure that's music to Emma's ears. But I mean, do you get a sense that concern about debt is going to be an impediment to the Green Deal?
I think language is extremely important here, and I cringe a bit about loan, I cringe a bit about debt, because the intent behind the Green Deal and the golden rule is, after the works have been undertaken, your outgoings from your home are less than they were beforehand. Yeah, because the reality is, I am in debt, using your language, to in the future, because I am pretty much committed to heating my house and paying an energy bill. Yeah. Now, we don't see it as a debt, but I'm already committed to that. I'm sure my daughters complain that the home isn't warm enough now, so switch the heat off, I'd have a riot. So I think in terms of language, we need to be very careful with householders. It is also important this is structured such that people understand this is a charge on the property, and that the ongoing costs are less than the ongoing savings. And in that sense, it isn't the words loan and the words debt, I think, are unhelpful. And we need to be able to convey that to householders, that they are net better off if they undertake this financially, and importantly, they're less exposed to the volatility of fuel price rises and more comfortable. Right. So it's the sort of triple win, and finance here is an enabler to a number of other messages, yes. But we've got to get those right.
I mean, in policy terms, it seems like a win-win, but there will be a huge challenge in communicating this package to householders, to small businesses who stand to gain from it as well. I mean, have other people got thoughts about the sort of language that we should be using to attract people's attention and give them confidence?
Well, just endorse what David said, which is, without shadow of doubt, whilst I'm raising finance, that should be behind the scenes. For the household, it's about you're making a saving and you're getting a warmer house. And the whole language should be about that, rather than thinking of it as a debt. So otherwise people start getting confused, what does it do with mortgages, etc. It's exactly what Dave just described. It reduces your energy bill.
The only thing of which we can all be certain is that energy bills are going to continue to rise.
Yes.
And I think anybody who is taking a view of even the medium term has to have that as a major concern for their household budget.
Yes, you can argue that the fact that energy bills have been rising inexorably is actually quite a good environment in which the Green Deal can land this autumn, and everyone feeling the pinch and looking for ways to save. I mean, Brian, do you feel that top line message about this is basically about saving money on your energy bills, making it cheaper to keep your house at a nice temperature? Is that getting through?
Absolutely. Well, I think that is a message that people want to absorb. I think there is an issue of trust, and therefore you have to make sure that there is an appropriate environment of competence associated with this. You know, we have all seen mis-selling situations that have existed in the past, and we have to make sure that isn't allowed to occur again. So there has to be confidence from the consumers and the people who are making the investment decision when they choose to improve their homes. But I just question this thing about sort of trying to avoid using words like debt and loans. Actually, people are very familiar with it. They make investment decisions all of the time. They make them for good, logical reasons. And actually, the more you try and avoid the elephant in the corner of the room, the more obvious it is that there is an elephant in the corner of the room. Consumers are intelligent. They know that they're going to be paying energy bills. They understand the world environment. They understand the volatility of energy prices. Protecting themselves against that through a judicious investment is a very sensible strategy. And actually, I worry that it serves to undermine the message of Green Deal when we seek to try and avoid using words that we know people might be a bit twitchy about. Actually tackling it head on, people are intelligent, they understand that debt is a way of financing a benefit that they can realise today and enjoy for the future. And that's a perfectly normal way for purchasing things.
Do other people have views on that? David and then Emma.
I mean, I would disagree. I think that it's not necessary to go in using unhelpful words when people are committed to a future spend on energy. So I think that I wouldn't certainly overplay the savings, but I think we're in that context. And why do I say we won't overplay the savings? Because, of course, you are paying off the capital and you're paying off some interest. So those savings actually could be quite modest. So I think it's a financial enabler. I think that is helpful. I choose my words carefully, recognising we are talking to householders that are well informed. But I think the language around protection against future energy price rises and comfort are perhaps the stronger ones for me to lead on.
Thanks for that, Emma, and then Richard.
I think this is quite a difficult issue, and we have been doing some thinking in DECC about the best way to present the language around Green Deal, because the important thing is that consumers understand the proposition that they're taking on, and we need to think also about how the Green Deal will be presented on the EPC, so that's understood by consumers. But I think there's another aspect to presenting Green Deal to consumers, and that's as a home improvement, and that appears to strike a chord with lots of householders. So in the same way as double glazing makes your home warm but is also seen as a home improvement, or central heating does, we need to get to the point where different types of insulation are also seen as home improvements as well as energy saving measures.
So if people are thinking about when they might sell their house or flat in the future, actually having certain things on the estate agent's particulars, like you know, 12 inches of loft insulation, double glazing, central heating, actually those are plus points.
That's right.
Okay, Richard.
2 points to pick up what Emma just said. The new energy performance certificate from April the 1st is much better, much more explicit, much more directed at energy efficiency and energy savings, and I think it's really great. But the point I was going to make is that consumers are interested in quality of service. Quality of service depends on skills, and we have to make sure that advisors are properly competent and qualified, and installers no aspect of cowboy builders. And the Green Deal kite mark, about which I am learning more but as days go by, I think is a very important aspect right across the Green Deal framework. It will be vital, but it's got to really mean quality.
Yes.
At all stages of the chain.
Okay, thanks, Richard. I want to come back to the issue of skills, the people who are doing the nuts and bolts work, and bring Richard and Brian in on that and others a little later. I think we've talked a bit about the best language to use in attracting the interest of householders and businesses to the Green Deal. But once they do show an initial interest, there are certain basic questions they'll start asking, including about the interest rate. Do we have a view on this panel about what a sort of ideal interest rate would be? Is there a sort of golden zone, if you like, within which that interest rate should ideally fall, so that it doesn't look too good to be true, but nor is it so high that it's off-putting? I'll ask Paul for his view on that first.
There's no one particular rate. I mean, at sort of 5%, the golden rule has a much sort of wider remit of what it can cover. Once you're getting in sort of 8-9%, it starts to diminish what could actually be repaid. So it's within that range, and the ideal is to get as low as you possibly can within that range. The higher it goes, the less you'll get under a Green Deal, the more you'd have to actually get eco subsidy to make some of these investments work. So what you're doing is you're just having to access a separate pot from eco to make it work, and becomes sort of less effective on the Green Deal side and more from eco support.
Right.
Come in on that.
Yes, Emma.
I think the interest rate is important, not least because consumers will look at the interest rate and they'll think, does that offer me good value? But I think what's most important is the total cost to the consumer, and that includes a lot of things. It's about the interest rate, it's about the cost of the packages, it's about the eco contribution, and it's about other costs which may be attached to Green Deal, such as the regulatory costs. So I think we need to look at reducing all of those costs as far as we can, whilst striking a balance with consumer protection on the regulatory side. because that will reduce the costs of the eco overall and the cost to consumers.
Right. Have you had some, I know that the consultation only closed last week, but is there a consensus emerging about what some of those sort of additional ways to make the overall package attractive to householders might be?
I mean, I haven't personally had a chance to look at many of the consultation responses. They're still very much an analysis stage. But obviously there's a question about what competition between individual Green Deal providers and what that will do to drive down the cost of the packages. And for us in government, it's for us to look at those regulatory costs and say, are these in the right place? Are these costs too high? And ensure that we're not placing unnecessary burdens on businesses that will drive up the cost.
Right, okay.
And I just re-emphasise that's the important thing here. The end-to-end costs, of which interest is one, but right through the administration costs, all of the costs incurred need to be driven to the lowest appropriate level, recognising we do need to ensure householder consumer protection. So that's the challenge, I think, for everyone that is currently involved in the developing policy area. That's key.
I think it's also key that the communication is timed correctly. I think we have to make sure that the conversations about Green Deal fall on the most fertile ground, when people are interested, when people are aware, when people can understand the implications of this. We have a fairly strong opinion that one of those occasions is the failure of a heating system. I think that's a time when people become interested in the cost of energy and the cost of energy efficiency. There are 1.2 million boiler replacements which happen in the UK every year, right. And every one of those, we feel, is an opportunity for a conversation about energy efficiency where the householder is likely to be more receptive to those messages. And out there every day there are installers who are having those conversations, and we believe if we can arm those people with the right kind of information, then we're going to be able to inspire people to take up the opportunities.
Right. I mean, is it also, is it deliberate planning by government that the Green Deal is sort of going to launch in practice in October when the nights are drawing in and it's getting a bit colder? Is this a piece of genius on the part of Whitehall, or is this just a happy coincidence? And does it matter?
I think you could probably argue that there is a benefit in launching in the autumn, as you say, when the nights are drawing in and it's getting colder. But set against that, my understanding is that most installation of solid wall doesn't actually take place in the winter, so there's benefits either way. October is the launch date that ministers have chosen.
Indeed.
You should have confirmed the genius of government there, Emma.
I think one of the interesting areas that you get into around this, that I absolutely agree with Tim's point that that boiler failure is likely to be one of the real drivers of inquiries. But what we have to recognise that when you're in a distressed purchase situation, engaging in a conversation that says, well, actually, we now need to go through a 3-week process and we need to do this, and you can't actually have your boiler until we can do the solid wall insulation. The solid wall insulation can't be installed until next March. That actually becomes a barrier. So what we have to do in terms of Green Deal implementation is to recognise when are the moments of actual chance of getting action, getting decisions made, and to make sure that our processes work with the customer's needs rather than with some idealised notion of, well, wouldn't it be good if? And that might mean that we have to look at, well, how can you implement a Green Deal package where measures are installed on a staged basis over a period of perhaps months?
Right.
How can you make sure that you can get on with the boiler install whilst the potential for other measures is perhaps being still progressed? So we just have to look at how to make this work from a consumer pull perspective, rather than just a this is our cookie cutter approach to Green Deal, this is the way it has to work. And I think that's going to be a real challenge for the whole industry, and also when you're creating an environment in which consumer protection is an integral part of it, which is very much the case around Green Deal, you have to be careful of letting the consumer protection tail wag the actually getting on with it dog.
Okay, there's a whole set of fascinating issues there around the real life situations where somebody is on the phone to a local plumber because their boiler's just broken down, or they there's a real cold snap and people are ringing the local authorities to get advice about making their home warmer, or they're in B&Q and chatting to somebody. Before we come on to that, the very important set of real-world challenges, I just want to talk about an additional financial aspect, which is this idea that there might be a sort of a cash-back incentive for householders to sign up to the Green Deal. This is something that ministers announced in the autumn. I think the sum mentioned was something like £150 per house, a sort of £200 million pot set aside by government.
There are actually two separate issues there. One is that in the consultation we've proposed that providers will be able to offer £150 cashback, a maximum of £150 cashback per household within the limit of the golden rule. And the 200 million incentives fund is separate to that, and we are currently assessing the best ways to make use of that money. So that's funds that we've been given through the Treasury to stimulate demand for the Green Deal in the first years.
So that could be £200 million on top of that £150 cashback incentive.
Yes, so the 200 million incentives is coming from government, and the £150 cashback is coming from the provider.
Right, okay. I mean, do people feel that additional financial incentives like a cashback scheme, or people who may have other ideas, will help to sort of hook in householders?
I have to say, suggesting that people should be financing £150 over 25 years seems to me to be perhaps not the healthiest way of moving. But I think in terms of have we got the right range of incentives and sticks and tambourines and all the rest of it, to use the Andrew Warren phrase, it is absolutely appropriate. The energy bill talks about mandating minimum standards in the rental sector in both commercial buildings and residential buildings from 2016-2018. I think that's a clear example of a stick. I think what we need to do now is to sort of look for the more structural incentive regimes, and whether that be tying it in with one obvious one would be more subsidised interest rates, but I don't think we're going to get very far with that. But linking it with stamp duty, linking it with council tax, perhaps looking at, I think France is introducing a scheme of where the capital cost can be offset against your tax. Right. So actually let's look for those more structural incentives. I mean, the £150 is what I would put into the category of it's a bit of a tambourine. It's kind of what you might...
It's pretty crude, but it might work, because even if they're paying it back and they've got to pay it back over 25 years, the prospect of £150 in their pockets will be attractive to some householders and might make the difference.
Can't hurt.
Sorry, Richard?
It can't hurt.
No.
Look at the Building Society's incentive to switch accounts.
Yes.
People do react to small incentives.
Yeah, okay.
I think most of us would be keen to address VAT in some way, and the innocuous situation where you're paying a reduced amount on buying energy, but you're paying the full amount on saving energy. And that doesn't seem to me to be a fair...
Although most energy efficiency measures within the Green Deal are subject to the reduced rate of VAT at the moment, I think most of the insulation measures...
Some are, I think.
Boilers are not.
Yes.
And I think this is where looking, and I think it'd be extremely helpful that packages that are sold with Green Deal, because the advice that goes with it and the survey and everything else, these are quite large elements that perhaps fall outside at the moment, and genuinely, if we're wanting to encourage people to take this up, should be 5% rated. I certainly endorse Brian's point about having an environment where there's a structural incentive for householders to take this up. Coming back to my previous point, this is a financial enabler. The savings are not going to be huge. A cashback, I think, is helpful, but for most measures, I would, certainly more expensive ones, I would suggest householders are probably putting some money towards this as part of the package, in which case, of course, cashbacks are nonsense. So my favourite there is to say, because it's revenue neutral to Treasury, would be factoring stamp duty up and down based on the energy performance of the dwelling, a little nudge. And I'm not mean penal, I mean a little nudge to get people to think about that EPC at the point they're coming to sell or buy or rent, yeah, and starting to infuse this into our approach to home improvement. Yeah, right. I think that's real key and deliverable at this moment in time because it doesn't cost anything.
Right. The Green Deal Finance Company did a consultation response, and I think we're probably even more hard line in as much as to be truly transformational will need more incentives and more mandation. And I think we were relatively hard on the mandation, and so stamp duty absolutely, and also around planning permission, so making it a precondition that you do this type of work for planning permission. And the reason I think we thought people would tolerate that is as long as, one, you give a lengthy notice period so people know it's going to come in over a period of time, and secondly, because the Green Deal, I mean the whole point of the Green Deal is it means you are not having to put in cash yourself, it's being financed through the Green Deal. You can therefore be tough on people because you're not asking them to incur debt necessarily. You're asking them just to take out something which pays for itself out of its own savings and nothing more. And that's why I think the populace will tolerate more mandation than perhaps people would at first consider.
Right. I mean, is government and Treasury sort of in the market for some of these ideas, Emma?
Well, there are some things out there already. So, for example, in the Energy Act, we introduced the provisions which will essentially make Green Deal mandatory in the private rented sector for properties which have an F or a G rating. They have to have had a Green Deal or have brought the property up to the appropriate standard. And before that, landlords won't be able to refuse tenants the ability to take out a Green Deal unreasonably. We're also looking at other issues such as whether it can be made part of the incremental building standards regime, and linking things like FITs and the RHI incentive to having met a certain level of energy efficiency. So there are things that we're looking at doing already, and we will keep under review whether more measures such as stamp duty, council tax is another which is often mentioned, are appropriate going forward.
Right, so all those ideas are still in play. Yeah. Great, thank you. I want to move on now to talking about opportunities for small businesses to get involved in the Green Deal. You hear lots of very positive rhetoric from ministers around the job creation opportunities that will be there, the opportunity for to upskill large numbers of young people in particular, and for small businesses, not just to benefit from the improvements that they could get upfront funding for from the Green Deal, but actually to be winning contracts, getting business out of the Green Deal. There's some very big, well-respected household names who've already expressed an interest in the Green Deal, and obviously Wilmot Dixon is one of them. How are we going to make sure that smaller businesses get their fair share of the action? And I'm going to ask Tim to talk about that first.
Okay, well, number one, I think they're fundamental to a successful Green Deal. Frankly, I don't think the Green Deal will actually fly without the SME contingent buying into it. And what we have to do is to be able to demonstrate to them that there's a value in them engaging in that, so that they can make their living out of it, and they can function within what is quite a complex administrative process. And certainly it's one of our commitments that we intend to try to minimise the administration for the smaller business person, but to give them access to the work. And that's a very simple thing to say, but I have to say it's going to I think, challenge us in many ways. But we have made a very, very public commitment to make that happen. And when you start to look at the figures, there are 191,000 private contracting firms in the UK, 180,000 of which employ between 1 and 13, 88,000 of which employ 1. Yes. So if you simply address scale, we're going to have to engage these people, and we're going to have to engage them with, I think, the confidence that this is a long-term commitment, and they're going to have to invest. They're going to have to invest in training. They're going to have to invest in skills that perhaps they haven't worked on before. And we're also going to try to enable that to happen in their local area so they can minimise their costs of engagement.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Paul?
I also see there's going to be a range of responses, because some SMEs will decide, yes, we want to become a provider, actually, with all the obligations and the customer care that implies, and that is all of the investment Tim describes. For those people, one of the things that could have been an impediment was finance. So the rationale, again, for the finance company is so we will provide finance to those people so that that's not a barrier. I think for a number of the others, it's much more about an alliance. What they will be doing is regional alliances, either with a major provider in the area, so that they're clear what services they're providing as a subcontractor, maybe with the local authorities, which I think will be key to driving demand for the Green Deal all over the UK. And so for them, it's a strategic question of where in the supply chain are they going to fit and who should they work with in their particular region.
We're all in agreement that SMEs have to be engaged with Green Deal because it cannot fly without them. The problem is how to enable that. Because actually, when you look at it from a consumer perspective, there are very long-term liabilities associated with that. And most SMEs are not in a strong position to be able to commit to that level of long-term obligation. You know, businesses come in, they go out. In order to ensure that that will be in place, you're looking at insurance or insurance-backed warranties, which can be phenomenally expensive. And then on the financing side, the consumer credit license requirements will make it very difficult for a lot of organisations to actually take on the role of being a Green Deal provider. So,
Brian, is that a financial issue, or is that a capacity issue or a skills issue?
Well, I'm not an expert on the consumer credit licence, but I mean, my understandings are that the administrative costs of holding a consumer credit licence as required by a Green Deal provider are very high. Just the fixed costs of holding that licence.
And it's creating a long-term customer care obligation, which a lot of these companies are not set up to do. So they've got to take that decision. Do they want to be a provider, in which case they are the customer face of a Green Deal for the life of that Green Deal, or not? And that's why I think some will just find that as too much of a barrier in terms of its cost and the administration and the post-care service. And that's why they will alliance with other organisations who've taken the decision to become a provider.
And don't forget, of course, if they're not working, if they're not out there actually installing, then they're not earning. So when you talk about the cost of that process, if they're doing administration, whatever administration it might be, whether it be CCA or customer support or whatever, then they're not actually earning. And that of course, is the ultimate cost.
David, can we turn to you for your views on how SMEs can get fully engaged in the Green Deal?
Yeah, I think SMEs, as has been said, are extremely important to Green Deal success. I personally think it is relatively unlikely there will be many that are Green Deal providers, because I think that is going to be too onerous. I agree with the clustering points that have been made. And certainly Wilmot Dixon do most of our delivery through SME companies. So that's something that we are very keen to support. And that isn't out of charity, that's very much because SMEs are operating at points within homes, at trigger points that make the timing for undertaking energy efficiency and low energy measures absolutely right. So there's a marriage here. This isn't a forced relationship. Okay. And it's incumbent on all of us to work out how to make that happen.
So you think there won't be many SMEs who actually take on the obligation of being a Green Deal provider themselves, but many of them will be involved in alliances that work with a particular Green Deal provider in a particular part of the country?
Yes, that's certainly how I view it.
Does that sort of fit with ministerial expectations about how this will work out in practice, Emma?
I think ministers are keen to ensure that SMEs are not prevented from being Green Deal providers, and indeed they're not. But I think there are a range of models, and some of them probably are more suitable for small businesses than others. And I think that the partnership model where they work with a Green Deal provider is probably the model that most SMEs will adopt. But I think it's very important that they are included in the Green Deal because they are driving a lot of that demand. They're the people having contact with the customer on the ground a lot of the time. We're looking at the different models that can include small businesses and SMEs at the moment, and DECC are actually having a number of workshops. So we are doing a lot of work in this area now.
Great, great. That brings us neatly on to this question of the people who are going to be having those direct conversations with individual householders or other small businesses that are thinking about signing up to the Green Deal, and a set of challenges there around quality control, around consumer protection, around accreditation and skills of people who'll be doing the actual work. And I want to bring Richard in first and then Brian to talk about that before we conclude.
Okay. Well, briefly, I believe the government's got the policy absolutely right. The policy is that all assessors and advisors have to have a qualification based on agreed national occupational standards. They then have to be certificated, and the certification body monitors their progress and their CPD, and very similar arrangements apply for installers related to PAS 2030. That's all great in terms of policy. In terms of implementation, there's much more work to do to ensure that implementation actually does, the reality reflects the policy, and that's what Brian and I and lots of other people in the sector are working on.
Great, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, progress is never as fast as you would like it to be, and there are still significant challenges, and things do kind of interrelate. Sort of the decisions on the framework for the Golden Rule calculation are clearly critical for what skills do you need the in-home advisor to actually have in order to be able to explain it to consumers. So there's a certain amount of everybody wants to run faster than some decisions can actually be made, and there's a kind of, you constantly feel as though you're tripping over the limits of current decisions. But we are making progress. I'm confident that there will be Green Deal advisors qualified and accredited in time for the launch. I think it's quite important that we don't see Green Deal as being a big bang solution that's got to solve everything between the 1st of October and the 31st of December this year. In reality, Green Deal is going to be a long-term policy solution. And the more we try and exaggerate the day one impact in order to try and sort of build it up, the more we risk seeding its failure, because actually we are dealing with a long-term structural reticence on the part of consumers to invest in energy efficiency, despite the fact that it makes financial sense to do so. Green Deal is not going to change that overnight, but the role of qualified, accredited consumers providing good quality advice in the home has to be part of that transitional process. We just have to make sure that the cost of accreditation doesn't become a barrier to actually the delivery of that advice.
Great, thank you very much. I mean, we all know that the Green Deal is now enshrined in law. It's there on the statute book in the Energy Act 2011. So this is a long-term strategy. I think there is broad cross-party support for it, and obviously opposition politicians will quibble about some of the details. But I think there is that cross-party consensus behind it. This has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you all. I'm going to ask each of you just to sort of give your top-line message for the benefit of our viewers about what you think is sort of the key thing for maximising the potential for the Green Deal. And I'll start with Richard and then just move along the panel.
Thank you. A quick and simple answer. In the immediate future, as much certainty as possible from government. At these events we run, it's always questions about the detail. I know that this takes time, but it's certainty on the detail, please.
Great.
As soon as you can.
Similar, really. I think we all want the Green Deal to be successful. The construction industry needs it enormously at the moment. I think what we want to see is consistency of policy over a long period of time, and also minimising the complexity of it for all of the players within the Green Deal.
Thank you. Emma.
Well, as you said earlier, our consultation has just finished, and we've got, I think, around 600 consultation responses to absorb and think about before we do finalise that detail.
Understood.
But I think my main point is that although the consultation's ended, we're still very much in listening mode, and we will continue working with Green Deal participants in the run-up to launch to make sure that we get it right.
Great, thank you. David?
From my perspective, two things. I think during the next period when the policy is being honed, refined, key focus on ensuring its end-to-end efficiency and driving out any possible costs that don't need to be there. And the second thing, I personally believe there will need to be structural levers to ensure mass-scale demand. I think it's a great idea. We're enthusiastic backers. But we need this to be mass scale for industry to really engage and press it, and they'll be looking for them.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
For me, I think it's about just building momentum, just making sure that we're really all working flat out to make October successful. So from my finance company, we're widening the membership, we're trying heavily to involve local authorities who are going to drive demand, but it's making sure we're all working to be ready for that deadline so that the transition to Green Deal is as seamless and successful as possible.
Great. And Brian?
Yeah, I think the key to it is that we're looking to finance energy efficiency measures out of savings. Now, you've either got two choices. You either wait for energy prices to rise so that you're driving people into fuel poverty in order that the economic incentives are there, or you look to put in place structural drivers that will help to drive take-up. I don't think planning for a horizon where energy prices are unsustainably high for the vast majority of the population, and therefore they choose to invest in energy efficiency as a future any of us want. So let's look to build on the Green Deal provides us with a framework. Now we've got to actually make sure that we've got all of the levers attached to it to actually drive its success.
Well, I'd like to thank all 6 of our panellists for coming here today and for sharing their expertise and their views with us and with you, the viewers. I hope you'll agree with me that it's been a really fascinating and constructive discussion, and I hope the first of many that EAEM will be hosting over the coming months before the Green Deal actually goes live in October. I'd also like to thank once again the Plum Centre for hosting this debate here at the Sustainable Building Centre in Leamington Spa, and thank you for watching.